tell me a little bit about your book. How did you come up with the story line?
Well, it was a while in the making. So I think, like I've said in a few interviews before, Gabi is a lot of me. So we have a lot of similarities. So some of it is like semi-autobiographical. So I wrote it actually in a time when I had failed miserably as a high school teacher, and I didn't know what to do with my life, because that had been like my goal. Like, I'm going to be a high school teacher. And when I taught high school and it wasn't what I thought it was going to be, I was kind of at a loss. Like, I didn't have a plan B. Like, this is, what do I do now? And so the government was going to start asking for their loans, and so I needed to keep going to school. And I took a couple creative writing classes, and I had always written poetry, and mostly poetry. That's first and foremost. That's what I write, poetry. And I sat in a class, and the professor was like, "Hey, so you've been writing a long time? You've been taking classes?" It's like, "Nope, this is my first class." She's like, "You need to be published. You do." And so I was really, a very emotional time for me. And so I just needed to get a story out. I needed to get my story out. And in talking with a lot of other Latinas about my age, and we had gone through very similar stories, very similar circumstances, and we hadn't really had our story told. And I thought, now is the time. I need to start writing this.
So the poetry that you had with your life really went into that book.
Oh, definitely. I think, Gabi talks about E.E. Cummings in there, and that in 10th grade, Miss Agard, she made us memorize E.E. Cummings, and that completely changed my life and my perspective of what the possibilities of words, what were the possibilities with words, like what could I do with language. Before that, you read like Edgar Allan Poe and Shakespeare, and everything's very like form, like, it has to rhyme, or it has to be a sonnet, or it has to be a sestina, it has to be a form. But then reading E. Cummings, it was kind of like, I don't know, like the walls in the house just kind of fell. And so it just opened, like, oh, there's more to this world than just what I was seeing. And so poetry is, it's so important to my life and to the way I look at the world and, interpret the world.
What kind of research did you do to...
Well, a lot of it was because a lot of those stories, a lot of those characters are kind of based on people I knew, but kind of, like an amalgamation, so like combined a lot of different people. But also I had to do research. So, I haven't been a teen in a while, so I need to, like, think about slang. And I do talk to teens all the time because of my nieces and my nephews, but also slang. I had to research a little bit, like, about in the abortion in the book. Like, I had to research on that because I didn't just want to throw something out there and pretend I knew what I was talking about, because I really wanted to know. Because even though I've had friends who have been in that situation, it was hard for them to talk about, so I didn't want to ask, oh, hey, about that procedure you went through. So I researched that, and a lot of the drug stuff, I had to kind of, put myself aside and, like, actually look at it through a different perspective. And
what does your typical day look like?
Well, it involves a lot of driving. I teach at 2 different community colleges, and so my typical day is I get up, I grade, or the night before I was grading, a lot of grading during the day and a lot of driving, prepping for lessons, and just teaching. On Mondays and Wednesdays I teach 6 hours straight, and then I have about an hour drive. But throughout, I try to write as much as I can. Like, during the day, if I get up early, I try to get up early and write. I'm not going to lie and say I write every day, because you should, but I don't, because it's just hard. But when I do sit down and write, it'll be for hours, and it's probably in the back of my mind. I'm thinking, okay, I'm really happy right now because I'm writing, but I also have like 15 essays to grade that I need to do. So, but that's pretty much what I do.
Do you have a specific writing spot that you like, or?
No, I have recently. I was doing mostly like computer writing, like just typing, but recently I went back to like handwriting, and so now I'm back to like writing by hand, and then when I feel comfortable with that, then I like transfer it over. And it's just a kind of different process. So I'll sit at my desk, or I'll sit anywhere it's quiet. Some people can, they need music or they need different. I just like it to be quiet. No noise at all. And I also, it depends, sometimes I'll be driving in my hours of driving and like, this is a really good idea for a story, or this is a really good idea for a poem, and I'll pull over to the side of the road and I'll like take out my notebook and I'll write, or I'll, record myself, and then so that it won't go away, because it'll go away.
What is the hardest part of writing for you?
Sitting down and writing. No, actually getting to it. No, I think the hardest part of writing is being able to, distance yourself from the writing. What I mean by that is, like, you write something and you feel sometimes very, like, for example, at the end of Gabi, there was a poem that was supposed to be there, and I really wanted it to be there, but it didn't fit. Like, it just wasn't working. And so having to like cut those things, and like because you work hard and then you think, oh, I worked like days on this and now I have to like cut. But also it's kind of two-sided. Like, it feels like, oh, I'm cutting, this part of me out, but it feels better now. So
what's the best thing about being an author?
Meeting all sorts of cool people. Yeah, I think connecting with so many different people. For me, the experience has been wonderful. That I'm being completely honest. I thought, okay, yay, my book is going to be published, and so like my friends will buy it, and like my mom will be supportive. But I didn't really expect like it to go further than that. Like, I didn't imagine. And when I started getting emails like, I read your book and I really connected with it. I'm not a young Mexican American girl. I'm in my 30s and I'm white, but I connected so much with Gabi and like her weight issues, and I just started thinking, oh my God, people are reading this who are not my family. And so connecting with so many people on so many different levels, and getting those emails like, you're telling my story, you're telling the story about like my family or my friend. That has been like the best part. I think that people actually have connected and seen themselves in the book.
So this is the first book that you've published. Mm-hmm. Are you working on anything else?
I'm working on a few different things. So I have a series for younger readers that I'm working on, and I mean, they're all looking for homes, right? They're all looking for a place to be published. And I have a couple picture books that I've finished that are kind of editing, and then the other novel that I'm working on is, I'm like 5 or 7 chapters in, is more like magical realism and fantasy. So it's very different than Gabi, very different.
So the way your book, you have it in like a diary type mm-hmm. form, which is really easy to go through. Mm-hmm. And I don't read very quick, and I flew through the book. The other books you plan on writing, mm-hmm. what type of form do you plan on putting them in?
So the children's books, well, they're pictured. Like, one of them's in rhyme, and then the other one is just prose. But the novel, that one is just straight prose, but it's kind of the way that I've set it up is so it's fantasy, so there's a quest obviously in it, but there is also a I don't know, like the fairy queen, like Arthurian kind of, I've broken up the chapters in like the chapter in which this happens, chapter the first, chapter the second, so it's kind of got an old-timey feel to it.
Do you have any favorite authors or books that you just
John
really
Steinbeck. John Steinbeck is probably my favorite author. My favorite book is East of Eden. And I used to, before I started teaching, I read it every year since my junior year of high school. But also, obviously poetry is big, and that one's kind of tougher. There's so many poets, like I love E. Cummings, but I also love like Sandra Cisneros or Michelle Serros, who just passed away. Allen Ginsberg, big, influence, and just so many different. Dennis Smith, he's an African American poet. He's like younger, and he's amazing. And I got to see him last year at a writing conference, and I was just blown away. But I mean, just to see what so many people do with words and language, and how they mean so many different things to so many people, but we're still all kind of connected. So I don't know, there's a lot of authors, but favorite book is East of Eden, probably John Steinbeck, favorite author.
So there's a zine in the middle of your book. Why did you choose to put the zine in there?
So the zine, actually, I started separately from the book. I had started several zines before. I never finished any of them. And so this one, I went to, someone was having like a zine party at their house, and so I went and I started it, and I just had it. And it was just sitting there, and I was like, what should I do with this? And I wrote the female body poem, and I was like, I'm going to put these two together. And then when I was working with Gabi, I was like, this needs to go in here. Like, this is why I'm doing this. And so I put them together, and that's how it came about.
So how do you pick, like, different names and, like, places and situations?
I made a list of what sounds right and what sounds wrong for the characters. Gabi seemed natural, like it just, okay, this is it. This is like, what needs to be. For her friends, for Sebastian, I actually had a friend help me. I was like, hey, I'm writing a character. What do you, help me out with the name? And he was like, name is Sebastian. I was like, all right, that's the name, that I'll pick. But it's, just trial and error. Like, this fits, this doesn't.
Was there anyone specific in your life who encouraged you to write or was more influential in your writing process?
I think writing is a very solitary act, like you do it by yourself, but if it's also a community, like you work with a community of writers, and I think that's really helped me. And so I have like my poetry group, like now as an adult, I'm part of a creative writing group, and they're so supportive, and they've helped me become a better writer. Without them, I don't think I would have written, like, finished, or the book would have been what it is. Also, my mom, since I was a kid, that's why I dedicated the book to her. Like, she would read to me well, not every night, but whenever she could, 'cause she worked a lot. So, she really encouraged me to write. Teachers, Miss Agard, she went to my book release, and I really don't think she understood when I was in 10th grade, like, what she had done, like, was teaching us E.E. Cummings. I don't think she understood, but kind of made her understand. I made her understand at the book release, and so she's been very excited, and so just surrounding myself with writers, and I don't know, that's mostly who's really encouraged me.
So I know a lot of authors travel to different places.
Mm-hmm.
Is there one specific event that really popped out to you, or a specific place?
Well, maybe the first event that I went to, which was in Houston, the Libro Fest. And I think only because it kind of dawned on me, hey, you're really an author. Someone actually paid for you to go to another state and read from your book. And that was kind of like a holy crap moment. Like, this is real. And I also, because at that, that it's small, it's put on by the Houston Public Library, but Richard Blanco is there, and he's he's read for President Obama for his inauguration, and he's like the first Latino gay poet that we've had, who's inaugural poet. And I love his poetry, like separate from that, but I just thought Richard Blanco is gonna be there. Like it was just kind of like, oh my God, like it was major to come to that realization. Like sometimes it still doesn't feel real. Like I'm sitting here, but I'm kind of like, am I really sitting am I really sitting here? So,
What's your favorite part about being an author, like being published?
I think meeting people. I think that's what it is. And getting to, like, I don't know how this is going to sound, but getting to speak, I think, from a different perspective that isn't often spoken about. So to me, writing is a very political thing, and any type of writing you do, whether you intentionally write politically, like I'm writing a political piece, or you don't, you've made a choice in writing, and it's going to go out there, whether it's like in a literary journal or whether it's in a book form. It's political. It says something about you and about where you're from, and if you have that space, if you've now taken that platform to speak and say something, I think it should matter what you say. And so I feel that, like, I've been fortunate that, like, oh, now I've had this place where I can speak from, and I can say, hey, there are not enough writers of color, and because there are a lot of people, or there are a lot of writers of color, but why are we not giving them the same attention that we're not giving to other folks, right? And so now I think that's really big for me. That's really important. I think the biggest thing, not the biggest thing, but an important thing about this writing thing.
So you have a very popping out cover on your book, very interesting collage of things. How did you pick all the different things, and why was that what you chose?
And I always forget to bring like an actual like hard copy of the zine. So Zeke, the book designer, he was like walking around a little bit ago. But I made the zine, right? I made the zine, and then I sent it to him, and he got inspired from it. So the actual zine, like the hard copy, they are magazine cutouts, so they're real people, right? The actual female figure. The background of it is obviously like, like the hot Cheetos and all of the different things that make up Gabi. So he got inspired from that, and he illustrated it, so that's how that came about. And he, like, what do you think about this, or what do you think about that? And
so there's a lot of body image incorporated in the book. With the cover, were you trying to also trying to create some of that body image in the cover?
I think, I think body image for young women, and young people or people in general, is such a big thing, especially here in the United States. Like, like what you look like, what you don't look like, what you should look like. And I think we all, at least for me as a teenager, I felt fractured. Like there were times that I was okay with being somewhat heavy. Like I was all right with it. And then some days I was like, man, I wish I wasn't this heavy. I wish I was thin. Or, like, why am I not like this? Or why am I, like this? And so I think body image really kind of dictates, sadly, a lot of how we see ourselves and our worth. And so I really wanted to present that, because even as adults, even as an adult, at least for myself, like, I still struggle with that sometimes, and you know, I'll have to remind myself, like, I'll be at the gym and I'll be like, oh man, Isabel, like, you really need to work a little harder, you know, you're not losing any weight. And then I remind myself, you just got a book published. You have a master's, like, that you are not, remind myself that how I look is not my worth, you know, like, I get to determine what I'm worth, you know, not other people.
And then also your title, it's the way you wrote it is there's like, you have the lines crossed out. Were those like ideas you had beforehand and then decided to change it, or why did you choose to do that?
Yeah, so initially, like, the first book, because there has been through a lot of drafts, so it was Photographs of a Fat Girl, and it was a completely different thing. It was a novel in verse, right? And then I changed it to Gabi, a gordita, in pieces. And then Gabi, a gordita. And it just went through a lot of phases. And then I sat down, like, what is it that you're trying to do? Well, this character, she's trying to figure out who she is. And she's got these labels put on her. And, but does she just want one? No, she's like a piece of all of them. So she's not just a gordita, she's not just, you know, a fat girl, she's not just this, she's, you know, just who she is, you know.
And so you did it based on her senior year in high school. Was there a specific reason you didn't pick a different grade, or why did you pick senior year?
Yeah, because senior year, I think it would have been too much, like, to actually make it realistic or authentic the way I wanted to make it. 4 years of high school is a lot of stuff that happens, and so then, you know, senior year, I thought it was a determined, like, a deciding moment. And you know, I think about my senior year, and so, like, this is where, like, the me part comes in. So my senior year of high school, like, I had to face these choices. Like, I wanted to go away to college, and my mom said, no, you leave when you get married, and not before, because you're going to go out and all you're going to go do is, like, sleep around. And I was like, oh, no, I just want to go to college. That's what I want to go do. And so she was very strict. Now I look back and I think I could have left. She would have been mad for a little bit, and then she would have gotten over it. But now that's, you know, I'm in my 30s now, so that's a different perspective. But as an 18-year-old, a 17-year-old, you know, I really felt like, well, I'm just going to stay here. I'll go to Cal State San Bernardino, and, you know, it's a good college. I'll be fine there, and I'll still go to college. So I really wanted her senior year, because it's kind of a pivotal moment, because we're kind of still teens, and we're adults, and we're kind of finding ourselves and trying to figure out who the heck we are, or who we want to be, and scary time. So I really thought that was, you know, a good place for her to be at.
So you're saying your mom said you couldn't go out of state. Was there a different college that you had your eyes set on?
Yeah, so I did. So obviously I had Berkeley in mind. And I just, that was it. Like, that's where I wanted to go. And it wasn't even out of state, like, it's the same state. But even, I thought, okay, well, there's a college, like, maybe an hour in Chapman University, which was about an hour away from where we lived. And they kind of wanted their freshmen to live on campus. And nope, I just couldn't go. It was, for her, it was, I think, a very scary thing to have her daughter, like, leave home. Because my mom, in some ways, she's old school. In other ways, she's, like, you know, not old school at all. But she didn't go to college. I mean, she made it to the 3rd grade, and my grandma pulled her out of school because she needed to learn how to make tortillas and clean house, because she was going to be a wife. And that was it, you know. And, you know, I talked to my grandma, obviously, before she passed away, and she said, you know, that she regretted it, you know, having that mentality at that time. But at that time, that's what women did. And so my mom, I think, was still struggling with, you know, well, this is how I was raised, and this is what women are supposed to do. But I know that my daughter should be doing something else. but I don't know how far to let her go before she kind of loses herself. And like, I see her perspective, and I don't agree with it, but I see it, you know.
So you mix Spanish and English in the book. Was there a specific reason you chose to do that?
Because that's a reality for a lot of people, because that's how I speak. You know, I don't think it was like a conscious choice. I think that's how it kind of came out. Like, if Gabi is is from Southern California, and she's a Chicana, she's a, you know, young girl, and she grew up in a Spanish-speaking household, but then she became bilingual. This is how she would talk, you know.
Yeah, my teacher fluctuates from Spanish to English.
Yeah, you fluctuate from Spanish to English, and it's you don't do it consciously. Usually you don't do it consciously. For me, if I'm grouped with my friends who are also Spanish speaking, you'll hear it just go back and forth between English and Spanish. Sometimes, I was walking last week with my friend Eli, and he only speaks English, and I started speaking in Spanish to him, and he looks at me, and I'm like, oh, sorry. sorry about that. So, you know, it's just, I don't know, it's natural.
Just a question for you, if you don't mind, Sage. One of the other books that I read as a teen librarian this past year was Meg Medina's book, Yaqui Delgado.
Yes.
Kick Your Ass, which I thought was like really good.
Yeah.
And then I'm driving, as I always do, like you drive a lot, and I was like, hey, it's Meg Medina, and she's reading Isabel's book. That's so cool. And she was recommending it and everything, and I just wondered what you thought about that. I was just so happy because
I was so happy.
Great, and your book was so great, and I think they both really touch on a lot of subjects that are like every teen's, you know, worries, or every teen's things. You know, in her case, it was bullying, and I know nothing about growing up Puerto Rican in New York City. This book is more like what life is like in Tucson and what I've experienced. But I just wondered what you thought about that. I just, you know,
that was another moment that I was like, is this really happening? Did Meg Medina really just call me on my phone to talk to me? Because I had read, you know, Yaqui Delgado, and I loved it. You know, I couldn't put it down, and I was just like, I've got to finish this. And then, having her, she called me, and the whole time, you know, I was like, Meg Medina just called me on my phone. And I try to keep it together and sound really cool as I'm talking to her. But she was, you know, it was a great experience. And we talked about identity, and we talked like 30, 40 minutes about identity and what she thought about the book. And she was like, I loved your book. And I was like, she just said she loved my book. She just said she loved my book. And so that was, I felt honored to have her do that, you know, to really have her do that. And it was great.
So you replied, just in case you didn't know from that alone, I think that's
thank you. Yeah, it was one of those, like, oh my gosh, great moments.
So I have a question too.
Sure.
Your character Gabi is really feisty, and she actually gets into a physical fight. So did you model her after yourself in that way?
I wasn't. I think the last time I got into, I probably shouldn't be admitting this in public. The last time I got into a physical altercation, like, that was equally matched, I think I was in 6th grade at the bus stop. But, you know, I did have, I'm more of a talker, and so in 7th grade there was a girl who had been bullying me since probably kindergarten, and we didn't have money, so she would, like, follow us around on the track. Me and my friend Michelle, both of us, we're broke, both of us, and so her and her little group of friends would, you know, well, you're so poor, you have to wear, like, you can't buy name brand clothes, and just constantly racist remarks, and just all throughout elementary school, you know, K through 6, and I was in 6th grade. That was still elementary school when I went to school. And then in middle school, she continued to bully, and I got so tired of her one day that I pushed her to the floor. And I was sitting there waiting for math class, my least favorite class, and I was sitting waiting, and she comes and she just throws my books off my desk. And this is after we've talked to teachers. This is after, you know, this has happened, and I lost it. And I got up and like I pushed her to the ground, and she got up again because she thought it was funny, and I pushed her to the ground again. And she left me alone after that. I'm not advocating physical violence, but, you know, because it doesn't really, I mean, it doesn't solve anything, but I felt so frustrated with her. Frustrated with, you've been at me since kindergarten, you know, and that was it. That was a tipping point. But I think 7th grade, that was the last time I try to stay away from that. Especially as an adult. You can get arrested. You can get arrested for that.
Thank you, Isabel.
Oh, thank you for these wonderful questions.